Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Balancing Work and Cancer webinar entitled Setting Boundaries. At this time, it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to your host for today, Ms. Nicole Jarvis. Ma'am, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Jess, and hello, and thank you all for attending today. As mentioned, I'm Nicole Jarvis. I'm the Senior Manager of Programs at Cancer and Careers, and I'll be today's host. Now, before we begin, just a few housekeeping items related to accreditation. Today's webinar is accredited for CEUs by ANCC, NASW, the New York State Education Department's State Board for Social Work, the California Board of Registered Nursing, and Society for Human Resource Management. If you plan on receiving continuing education credit for this program from any of these accrediting bodies, please proceed with the following steps. First, you must call in individually. Participants who listen in on someone else's line will not be eligible for credit. And second, you must complete and submit the evaluation and post-test, as well as receive a passing grade of 80% on the post-test. Following today's session, you will receive an email with all of this information, and this email will be sent by 5 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow, and certificates will then be mailed within 4 to 6 weeks. Also, please note that the planners and presenters for this program have not disclosed any pertinent financial relationships or conflicts of interest, and no commercial support was provided for this program. The lead sponsor for Balancing Work and Cancer webinar series is Genentech, and in addition, Cancer and Careers year-round sponsors support of all of CSU's core programs, including this one. Thanks to their support, we've created the Balancing Work and Cancer webinar series in order to provide patients, survivors, and healthcare professionals with concise, targeted information to help you all understand a variety of issues that surround balancing work and cancer. Today's topic is something many of us know is important, but can be scary and challenging to do in both our personal and our professional lives. Setting boundaries can be a really valuable way to engage in self-care at the workplace. Implementing healthy boundaries allows you to be more in control and to feel more empowered. To help us explore this topic today, we're delighted to have Allie Schaefer. Allie is a licensed clinical social worker and has a private counseling practice in Nashville, providing individual and group therapy for adults navigating life transitions, coping with health challenges, and desiring to live more fully. Allie has worked directly with people impacted by cancer across the cancer care continuum in various clinical settings for over 16 years. Prior to her current role, she was a faculty member and clinician with the Vanderbilt Ingram Cancer Center psycho-oncology team and the manager of patient and family-centered care. Additional clinical social work experiences include working with at-risk youth and their families at an outdoor wilderness program and a residential psychiatric hospital. Following the presentation, there will be time for you to ask questions, and if you'd like to, you can submit them into the Q&A box throughout the presentation, and then we'll get to them once it's finished. But for now, I'll turn it over to Allie to get us started. Allie?
Thank you so much, and thank you to the incredible team at Cancer and Careers for your ongoing support at the intersection of cancer and employment, such important places to work, and I am grateful to be a partner with you. And I'm so grateful and excited to talk about boundaries with all of you who are here today or listening to the replay. It's my intention to offer you a framework to look at boundaries and to ignite possibility about the ways in which boundaries can help you to feel more in control of the experience that you have, both at work and in your life. And also to invite each of you to use boundaries as a tool to positively affect your well-being. So a little bit about what I'm going to do and how I'm going to offer this. I will invite you to think about your current relationships with boundaries and to personalize all of the information I offer today to you and what feels right and good for you in your life right now. I will encourage you to sit with this information, consider discussing it with others, getting their input and thoughts about boundaries. I won't tell you that it's all going to be perfectly clear or make sense in one conversation today as to how to do boundaries, but I'm going to give you a lot that's going to give you great starting points from wherever you are. And in this presentation, I won't be able to speak to each and every unique situation that finds where you are today, but I hope I'll be able to provide you enough to help you look at your work and life to make both informed choices and to take conscious action. I will also address some specifics related to the current place we sit in the world of work and COVID and cancer. I will also remind you that boundaries are lifetime work, and we are all starting, doing, and engaging this work from different places and different starting points. So I'll invite and encourage a lot of compassion and kindness. And so today, just think of this as one big invitation to consider, to reflect, and to relate to boundaries. And I hope to show you, if nothing else, that boundaries are incredibly important and can be incredibly impactful in your life and to have the life that you desire. So let's get started. I first want to invite you to do a self-rating. On a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being boundaries, what's that? And 10, I am a boundaries rock star. How would you rate yourself on creating, implementing, and maintaining boundaries at work right now? Just give it a quick thought. What's your rating, 0 to 10? Write it down. You're not going to have to share it with anyone unless you want. Great. So with that initial rating scale, we're going to talk about why a presentation about boundaries and work and cancer. And let me first say, boundaries are important for all humans, not just those impacted by cancer. And I think there are some unique considerations related to the cancer experience that really serve to invite the conversation and to bring in this awareness around boundaries. So real life for people with cancer. People impacted by cancer are often in the position of not having a whole lot of privacy, of having strangers have open access to personal information and their bodies. And this can create an unconscious pattern that people with a history of cancer feel like they're not allowed to have boundaries or expected to be open in all areas of their life. And that doesn't always feel good for people, and that is not necessary or what's obligated. And so I kept in my work over the years seeing time and time again the humans that I was working with that were navigating cancer have a lot of challenges when it came to work. They were burned out, resentful, and angry about work situations, struggling to have boundaries with work and life to support their well-being. And so I realized we needed to start to talk about this more proactively and preventatively to help people impacted by cancer understand how to use boundaries as a tool in work and in life to support themselves, to give them an increased sense of control and engagement and life satisfaction. And so you'll see these quotes, and some of these might resonate. Maybe it's what you felt. Maybe it's what you've heard others say about how they feel at the intersection of cancer and work. When things get stressful, one of the ways I cope is by overdoing and overworking. Gosh, I'm so proud of myself that I worked all the way through treatment and didn't miss a day of work. That's a real badge of honor and a sense of control and continued normalcy for a lot of people navigating cancer. But then, maybe once treatment's done or once they enter a maintenance phase of treatment, they find themselves exhausted and wishing they had taken more time off or asked for some help. I want to be really clear that whether or not you have or are going to ask for any type of reasonable accommodations related to your job, there is still a need and a benefit to boundaries. So in this exploration of boundaries, you also might become aware of some need for reasonable accommodations to better support yourself. I also want to note that Cancer and Careers has great information about reasonable accommodations. So that is another conversation for another day, but just wanted to acknowledge it. So let's take a holistic view and approach to this conversation of life, work, and cancers and boundaries. I want to do that through the holistic approach because if we only talk about life, or only talk about cancer, or only talk about work, we're really going to miss the full picture. And when we look at the full picture, we find far more options, solutions and intersections or inflection points that we can influence and shift for our benefit. And in this diagram, you can see all three of these things are interrelated and connected. And so the hypothesis is, if we change one, we have the potential to impact the others. And boom, ripple effect. So it doesn't mean we have to look directly at each thing to affect it. If we do a little bit of life, we might affect a little bit of work. If we shift a little bit of the cancer piece, we might affect life and work. So I really want to give you this to play with, almost like you've got some Play-Doh that you can manipulate and maneuver to have some fun with. I also like the holistic view because there are going to be some things that you cannot change. So I'm not going to sit here today and say, no problem, you can change all the things, because that's just not true. And if there are some things that you can't change, which is true, this can further reinforce feelings of being out of control or feeling helpless if that's the only thing you're looking at. So when we allow for what we can't control, we also create space to consider what we can control, which reinforces the experience that we want. So this holistic view is what I want to invite you to consider as we're moving through this conversation. And a little bit of truth delivered in haiku form. You can't do it all. You get to choose what you do. So please choose wisely. And today, what I hope to do is to help you choose wisely, to make decisions based on what is important to you, to not react based on stress or emotions, and to teach you and continue to remind you that you are in charge of your boundaries. So now I'm going to debunk a bit of a fantasy or a myth about boundaries. And maybe you've thought this, or maybe you've tried to use boundaries to change another person's behavior. And I'm not calling anyone out. I'm simply just setting the tone. That boundaries are not about shifting someone else's behavior. They are about taking care of yourself and your needs first. So it's a really big reframe from the external to the internal, from others to self. And so boundaries are about taking care of yourself, which may over time lead to other people's behavior changing. But I just want to be clear, this is not the primary goal or the motivation. This quote is also really important. What you allow is what will continue. Boundaries is a tool that is a way you can communicate to people how you want to be treated, what is okay, and what is not okay. So now let's talk about the benefits of clear and healthy boundaries at work. So why all the hype? What's the good stuff? Why do I care about boundaries? Clear boundaries will give definition to time, roles, responsibilities, and expectations, which sets everybody up to work efficiently, securely, and sustainably. And sustainably is really the key here. We don't want you just working for one day or 1 week or 1 year. We want you to have the capacity and to have the tools and to have the framework and boundaries to work well over time in a way that feels good to you. Let's dive a little more deeply into the real benefits of clear and healthy boundaries. So all of these benefits, again, are relevant to you as a human, with or without cancer. And they may become more important if you have cancer or a history of cancer as a way to help you take care of yourself. So take a look at these things and notice boundaries help you take care of you is part of a comprehensive personal care plan, helps you manage your time and energy for the things that matter to you, ideally rejuvenates you versus depletes you, and help to reduce or avoid burnout, helps you be actively engaged in writing the rules of your life, helps you to know when you've achieved a goal or completed a task. That's a real important one. Without boundaries, you don't know where's the end point. Boundaries may also help reduce conflict and role or task duplication, so everybody knows what's their lane, what's their job, and what's their task or expectation. Clear boundaries can also model and invite others to implement and maintain their own boundaries. And it may create feelings of safety and security for others. So even this notion of what's okay, what's not okay, it might look like or sound like, please get me the changes to the article by 9 a.m. Friday so I can provide comments by the end of the day. And if not, I'll provide them when I'm back in the office next week. So I want to also let you know there's a way to kindly and clearly, without conflict or confrontation, communicate boundaries. Another point I want to make is, previously at one of the Cancer and Careers conferences in which I was talking about boundaries, one of the audience members asked, hey, since I've been living with cancer, I'm really trying to focus on all the yeses out of maximizing everything I can in life. And she was really conflicted about how do I insert boundaries which feel like a whole lot of no's, which is contrary to how I'm trying to live my life with cancer. And what I want to say to you that I said to that person is boundaries help you to say yes, to increase joy and enhance your personal life and your work experience based on your personal values. So while sometimes boundaries sounds like a lot of no's, it also really creates space for a whole lot of yeses, which is the goal here. So benefits. Now let's talk about what are the costs, right? Costs of unclear and unhealthy boundaries are actually more work and a greater energy drain because everyone is trying to figure out the width and the depth of their work zone. Everybody is in the dark without a map trying to figure out what to do. Maybe that's a little dramatic. People usually have some sense, but it's just not clear. And it's like, who's on first? With a lot of questions, few answers, and feels like you're doing a lot of assuming, and you know what they say about assuming. And you're also doing a lot of running around in circles with no flashlight or no map. And that's just not a good setup for a work experience. Let's take a little more look at these costs of unclear and unhealthy boundaries. Again, less time, energy, and resources to take care of yourself because you're trying to figure out what's due, what's needed, what's expected. Decreased presence and attention to do the things that are important to you can lead to burnout, exhaustion, fatigue, resentment, which is counter to the environment your body needs to recover, heal, and live at whatever stage and place you're at. And this is a big one. This is what I kept hearing over and over from the humans with cancer. Burned out, exhausted, fatigued, resentment, trying to figure out how to feel better in their lives, how to show up for work, which they care about, right? So a lot of you care deeply about your work, and we want to help you continue to work in a way that feels good. Waiting for other people to figure out what you need or want, and they may never get it, so you're going to be waiting a long time. Might as well pour a very big cup of coffee and hang out, or tea, whatever your pleasure is. High degree of confusion, a lot of potential for conflict, miscommunication, misunderstanding. Potential for overworking. I'm sorry, but who wants to overwork? No one. That's not the goal. There is no medal for overworking. And unclear and unhealthy boundaries leave you with no clear end point and really unsure of when it's enough. When can I stop? When can I finish? When can I be done? When can I take a breath? And this job insecurity. I don't know what's truly mine. I don't know what I'm going to be evaluated or rated on, so I'm just taking, a guess and hope it's good enough. And with regards to this endpoint, let me go back for a moment. We all like to know endpoints. Our human brains are not fans of unknown timelines and high degrees of uncertainty, which is exactly what many of us are sitting in right now. And it overloads our brains. So boundaries give some framework, some definition, and containment to the work and to the focus that can really help ourselves in stressful situations. So if boundaries are so awesome, Why are they so challenging, and what gets in the way? It's a great question, and I like to highlight what might be getting in the way, and I want you to think about what might be getting in your way around setting boundaries. Some people, it's as simple as they've never been taught and they haven't learned how to have healthy boundaries. There's a lot of shoulds at play here. I should know this. I should be able to do this, regardless of whether it's reasonable. I should be superhuman. I should be able to just deal with this. I shouldn't complain. There's also a lot of fear. Fear about if I set a boundary, if I speak up and advocate for myself, I might lose my job. Fear of conflict or retaliation or other people's reactions and responses. Right? And you can hear how a lot of these come into play for people who are navigating cancer, trying to navigate and manage other people, other people's reactions, wanting to be part of a team with their colleagues, maybe with their colleagues who have already done a lot to support them while they've been in and out of work. Right? I'm trying to make up for all I didn't do when I was out or when I will be out. I feel like I've already asked for enough while I've been navigating cancer, right? These are some of the things that really collapse a person's ability or feeling strong enough to ask for and set boundaries. There's also just personal motivation. I want people to like me. I don't want to ask for help. I don't want to admit I can't do something. These things really tie us up and get us in the way. And we wind up far more depleted than we intend to be. And then we're trying to figure out how to get out of this hole we've inadvertently created for ourselves. And I'll say that overworking is not healthy boundary setting. So again, thinking about what gets in your way, and here's a couple of questions for you to consider. Am I using work or lack of boundaries to avoid feeling something or dealing with something in my life? Am I trying to keep things the same and maintain a normalcy and a normal routine and workload while navigating cancer to feel like everything's okay? I want to invite you to look at these questions for yourself with curiosity and without judgment. What can you learn about what's going on for you? Is there something else I need to be aware of that is preventing me from setting boundaries? So again, boundaries can really help you work through treatment sustainably, return to work without burning out, establish healthy, sustainable work patterns, show up for the things that matter to you, feel a sense of control and normalcy, let in what you want, keep out what you don't. Boundaries can be proactive, not just reactive, so it sets you and others up on the front end. And again, you're going to hear throughout the conversation today a lot of similar themes and comments. This is how boundaries can help you. This is why boundaries are useful and important. So the good news, as we are having this boundary party today, is everyone can learn how to implement and maintain boundaries. Yes, even you, regardless of where you've been, where you are, you can begin to learn healthy boundaries. Upholding a boundary is prioritizing yourself and reinforcing the belief that you and your needs matter. Remember, you are in charge of your boundaries. You are in charge of yourself. And boundaries are one way to continue to demonstrate that. This last one, people may receive and respond to your boundaries better than you expect. Right? I also want to point out, you've probably seen the meme floating around the internet that says something to the degree of people who push back on your boundaries are the exact people that benefited from you having no boundaries. So implementing boundaries doesn't mean people might not have a reaction, but it's about, are you implementing and teaching and setting yourself up for the things that matter so that you can work, live, and be the ways that you want to. All right, so hopefully I've helped you be on board with why boundaries are a good thing. And now you're curious about it and saying, okay, great, Allie, so where do I begin? And I'm going to give you a multi-step process for you to consider and use for yourself to identify some places that you might want to create, implement, or continue to maintain boundaries. So let's begin with step one. First, I want you to think about what 3 things are important to me. Right? There's no wrong answers here. This is about literally what is important to you. It might be doing a good job at work, quality time with my family, and my health. And then I want you to look at what are the non-negotiables that I need to show up. And everybody's got them, whether you're looking at them or aware of them or not. What do you need in order to show up at your job to do your best work? For me, it's sleep. I need consistent physical activity and movement in my body. And I also need to have energy to show up at work to do my job. And once you've got those basics, then I want you to begin to take an honest look at work. And again, there's no right or wrong answers. This is just, can you look at where you're at right now? And I've got a list of questions that you can consider. Doesn't mean you have to ask all of them. That might feel like too much information to work with, and that's not the goal, to overload you. But it's just a bit of a framework to see what are the questions that might help you uncover information and spaces about what's going well, feeling well, what's not going well, and not feeling good that might need shifting, and could boundaries help those spaces? You'll see I invite the notion of what is my current capacity. And you're going to hear me mention this because this is an important factor. Everything could be a great idea, a great project. And if you don't have the current capacity or resources, it doesn't actually matter how good of an idea it is. And so this notion of capacity also creates space for you to consider, what do you need to increase your capacity or presence to do the thing or that awesome idea? And then maybe with time and increased attention to building your capacity and presence, you could do said awesome idea, and that would feel really amazing. So keeping open-ended things that things will change, you have the capacity to adapt and adjust. And so again, don't overthink the answers to these questions as you're beginning or wherever you're at with boundaries. Sometimes we just take a first pass at the surface to see what's right there and what's the easiest place to begin. Sometimes it's so obvious that you discount the information because it feels or seems so simple. So step 3, looking at boundaries and work. What boundaries are working well? What boundaries are not working well for me right now? So boundaries, it might be, it's awesome to leave or finish the workday at 5 o'clock every day. What boundaries are not working well? I'm working through lunch and that doesn't work. Or my workload is too much and I'm setting too many aggressive deadlines. Maybe some of the boundaries need to be adjusted. I'm doing too much discussion about politics and current events when I talk with my colleagues. What boundaries are missing? I'm responding to work emails at night and on the weekends. My colleagues are talking openly about my health status and my treatment, and that just doesn't feel really good for me. Or, oh, wow, I noticed I am double booking meetings because I've given everyone access to my calendar, and that's creating a lot of headaches and nightmares, and it's just too much. And then we're going to apply the same thing at life. Remember, life, work, and cancer are all interrelated and interdependent. And so we're going to use that. So now we're going to take an honest look at life, asking some of the exact same questions. How do I feel in my life? What's working well? What are my personal priorities and needs? What do I want more of? What do I want less of? Right? What are the things in my life I have control over and can change and influence, right? So we're really pointing your focus and inviting you to look at the things that you can make choices around as the things that you can influence in a positive direction for a different experience. You're going to look at your boundaries in life. Boundaries that are working well. Moving my body 4 days a week. Limiting social activities during the week, which really drain me. Boundaries not working well. Oh my goodness, I have found the best TV show, and now I'm staying up way too late watching episode after episode. Yes, Netflix, I am still watching. Thank you for asking. Also, wow, I think it's a good idea to cook dinner from scratch every night, and yet that actually, I don't think that's working. That seems like too much. Who I'm spending time with might be a boundary that needs to be adjusted in both directions. Ooh, this person, I feel really good every time I am with them. This person, I feel drained and depleted and really heavy. And so that's something I can pay attention to. Oh, I don't have enough me time in the week. I really need to adjust and schedule in some me time. And boundaries are missing. I'm not having any fun. So I need to create some boundaries to give myself more time for fun. Okay? So again, your answers, your life, your choices. And now we're going to take an honest look at Cancer to say, what kind of space is Cancer currently occupying in my life? And depending where you're at right now, it might take up a lot of space, or it might not take up a ton of space. No wrong answers. It's just, where are you at? And again, what are the things that you can control and what can you not? It is really important, too, that addressing emotions that might be coming up, either in work, life, or Cancer, it's also really important to look at the emotions that are coming up around all of these things. So just a little plug to tend to the emotions as well. Those can't be skipped, but that's not about this conversation today. You can also, if you need to get more information about the honest look at Cancer, go back to work and life and ask yourself some of the questions to see if you can get more information to help you. Now, step 7, with all the information that you've gathered, you can begin to create some boundaries or have an idea of where you can insert boundaries in order to shift your experience. Right? So you've identified your values and your non-negotiables. You've taken an honest look at work. You add that to an honest look at life, an honest look at Cancer, an honest look at things I can control and influence. And that creates the space for boundaries. I want to say we just have taken you through steps that are gathering a lot of data, which might feel like a lot to try to work with. It's a lot to process and integrate to make sense of. And so I want to just invite you to keep it simple and start somewhere, which might literally be where it feels easiest or most obvious. Don't try to change too many things at once, or try to all of a sudden this afternoon or tomorrow morning insert like 10 new boundaries all at once. It's probably a lot and too much. And it's going to frazzle you, and then you're just going to drop all the boundaries and be like, well, that didn't work, right? So we want to set you up for success, to go so slowly, to build upon your boundaries and your habits, and to create space also to keep evaluating and assessing, does this feel good? Is this the boundary that I want to implement, or do I need to do something different, right? So give yourself some space and some wiggle room to also see how things feel. And if it doesn't feel good, pay attention to that. So with all the information that you just gathered when you sit down to do this on your own, you can take a moment and think about this really hopeful question. What could change, and how could I feel if I created some different boundaries? Right? This is possible. Regardless of where you sit in your life today, you could feel differently. You do have power to make some changes with conscious choices and actions. And then remember, right? Work, life, Cancer are all connected, and it is possible to affect all by shifting and changing one. And if you're feeling stuck in one arena, like maybe even work feels really hard and complicated right now to identify or to create some new boundaries in that specific arena. And so maybe where you want to turn your focus and attention is to life or Cancer, and say, where could I make some changes in those arenas that might have a trickle-down effect into the work arena? And once you start to feel the benefit of inserting some boundaries or upholding some boundaries, you might feel a little bit buffered and empowered and excited to try it in some different areas. Right? So you have a lot of potential to not be or feel stuck in your life. So I wanted to give you also some questions to think about, right? So again, as I said at the beginning of our time today, I'm going to give you a lot of information for you to work with. And I want you to have some questions to create clarity that might be helpful as you're looking at these different arenas in your life, work, cancer, right? Things like, does this need to be done? Does this need to be done by me, right? So it can be actually really illuminating to start asking yourself these questions. Be honest as you can, as you answer them. It can be really easy for your ego or pride to get in the way, or for the barriers that we talked about earlier to surface as you're considering setting boundaries, right? And it can feel a bit humbling if you ask the question, does this need to be done by me? And the answer is actually no. That might raise some feelings for you, and I totally get it. And yet, could you leverage that there's someone else who could do something maybe that you don't have the capacity or don't want to do in this moment, and offload it to somebody else so that you can really do the things that matter to you and that you feel most lit up about, right? So a lot of questions. You may be really practiced at asking yourself reflective questions, and this might be a very new task for you. And so again, kindness, compassion, non-judgment, noticing who are the people it's easy or hard for me to implement and maintain boundaries with. Oh, my boss. Every time we have a conversation, I just lose my words and I wind up walking out of our meetings with 5 more things on my to-do list, right? Or, wow, this person I find it really easy to honestly communicate and to say no with, right? So also start to tease out, it's not maybe that you're just bad at all boundaries, but maybe these questions could help you identify some of the smaller or specific areas where you need some support to specifically create or address boundaries differently, right? So this really just pulls out some of the details and the nuances of these different arenas and of your participation in these arenas. I also wanted to give you some opportunities for boundaries. So we might be sitting in this conversation, and I'm inviting you to gather all of this information. And you also might be saying, Allie, I have no idea where to even begin, what could be a boundary, or what that might sound like or look like. So I wanted to give you a couple of ideas. Right? Boundaries around what information you will share with your boss or coworkers, around your medical history, or around what's going on for you medically right now. Boundaries around whether other people can talk about it or disclose it to others. Are you going to have conversations with colleagues about emotional impacts of cancer or treatment, or what it was like for you? What is the information, if any, you're going to share with prospective employers, new employers, or coworkers, right? There's a lot of people who make the assumption they have to share everything about their medical history. That is not true. And it's really important that you know what you legally have to and get to share and what you do not need to share. And Cancer and Careers does a ton of great webinars, articles, and services to help you really understand and to practice how to set boundaries around the information you're comfortable sharing and don't want to share because you don't want to and because you don't need to. There's also a lot of opportunities for boundaries around work schedule, commuting, traveling, working from home. And again, this is where it comes into play that I can't speak to every one of your unique experiences, but I want to invite you to really critically look at all the nuances and the tasks and the parts of your job that might be up for consideration around boundaries. Do you take breaks through the day? Is that something you can set some boundaries around? What's your social time or media consumption? I know that lately I've had to be really clear on my personal boundaries about looking at social media or news in the middle of my workday, because depending what I see, that could really shift my focus and drain my energy in a way that takes away from my focus and presence to do my job. So again, some of these things are really subtle. They might seem really silly, but they can have a very big impact on the quality of your day and the experience that you have at life and work. Can you also prioritize or shift roles, projects, tasks, deadlines, right? A lot of people go, oh, no, I can't do that. Is that true? Is that true that you might not be able to ask for something to shift? And would you be willing to create some language that feels good, to set some boundaries, to create a better experience? And again, opportunities for boundaries about life outside of work, again, as we look at the interconnectedness. And so hopefully in this, you'll see you actually have a lot more opportunity to influence and engage with your life than maybe you've realized. I also know and wholeheartedly respect and trust that there are some things that are non-changeable and non-negotiable in your particular work environment and culture. And so that's why I'm going to keep asking you to widen the lens of what you're looking at. Here's another exercise, a little bonus, if you will. If you wanted to play around with this might also help you think about how to set some boundaries based on your personal values. This is a great exercise by Amber Ray, and it goes through columns. I value, so I need, and will honor by. And this might be another helpful way and a creative way for you to look at it that you can do outside of this call. So some reminders and a pep talk. Right? It's really important that I do my job today to not only teach you about identifying boundaries, but also setting you up to understand what it might be like for you to create, insert, and maintain boundaries. And I want to be clear, part of why I say create, insert, and maintain boundaries is because boundaries are not just a one-time thing, right? You're going to likely have to keep inserting or keep maintaining boundaries as you go. Some people hear it for the first time and get it, but a lot of situations and a lot of people need repeated reminders and communication about boundaries. So just understand it's a creation, insertion, and maintenance of boundaries. I want you to be willing to start somewhere. In this conversation, you may be identifying, oh my gosh, like fireworks in your brain, all these places that boundaries are like, oh, I could do that, or I could do that, or I could do that. And then you might get really overloaded and get stuck in inaction. So I want to encourage you, be willing to start somewhere. Trust that starting somewhere is enough, and trust yourself with where you choose to start. Plan for, that sounds very dramatic. And what that really means is, you might say, this is what I need, and someone disrespects or ignores that. We're going to give them the benefit of the doubt. They don't mean to. Or someone might push back on the boundaries. It's totally natural for people to test boundaries, especially if you've not inserted boundaries in this particular way, or it's not part of your dynamic that they're really familiar with. And so, or they're not good at boundaries, and so they don't do a great job of honoring other people's boundaries. And so if people push back, I want to be really clear to say, it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong, okay? Trust yourself in the boundaries that you're inserting, and trust yourself to also figure it out as you go, okay? This next one, no, is a complete sentence. If we were sitting in a room together, I might hear a collective jaw drop and gasp of, what? I can simply say, no. Yes, you can simply say no, period, without any additional information. Anything that comes after no is your choice to share or include. And so part of this might be for you to practice getting really comfortable saying no and then letting that awkward and uncomfortable silence hang out. I also want to encourage you to practice using the pause button, right? Sometimes all you need is just pause and space to think of a response that feels good. And when you feel rushed to have to give an answer, you're often reacting and just saying something, but it's not always what you mean. So just say, hey, let me get back to you. There's also room for negotiation in boundaries. So while I'm setting this up as a lot of this is what you will do, this is what you won't do, there is also communication and conversation and compromise if it feels good and it's aligned with your values and priorities. Be prepared to set boundaries by role-playing with friends or colleagues. Right, so this is a great thing that you can practice. Hey, can I talk about some language? I need to practice something that I'm really worried about. These last two things, someone else's curiosity is not your responsibility. Oh gosh, I wonder if she's okay. Not your responsibility to answer. And someone else's fire is absolutely not your fire. And this is true with or without cancer, but we all forget this and get caught up in other people's fires. And so here's your reminder and permission to not get caught up in someone else's fires. Here's another exercise that you can look at once you've created some boundaries. You can run it through this little checklist to see if it's as solid and tight and clear and professional as you need it to be, and does it address the thing that you're trying to address. So a couple of thoughts, as I said, I'm going to try to also speak to some of the additional experiences that you might have around boundaries. Work and boundaries and COVID, regardless of where you sit in the world today, you may be having some things that are unique to this time, this unprecedented experience that we sit in. And so I want to encourage you to think about some of the things that this time right now really calls for that you might not have been doing outside of this time. Okay? So focusing on the basics, focusing on self-care, clear communication, lowering expectations of self and others, being mindful about the conversations that you have. Right? Be willing to clearly communicate your comfort and your needs about health and safety procedures, especially as it relates to your immune system or your medical needs. Right? These are some real clear places to have conversation. If you're working from home, I just wanted to give you a couple of tips. These are some spaces that you can implement some boundaries to create a dedicated workspace or dedicated work hours that are then yours to honor. This is important to discuss. Some people feel like, oh gosh, I don't know how I'm going to go do something that I haven't done before with people that know me as not having any boundaries, right? And the reality is, it might be easier to do boundaries with a new team, with a new job, and a new culture. This is not advertisement or encouragement for you to quit your job and get a new job just so it's easier to do boundaries. But I just wanted to acknowledge that when you insert yourself back in the same environment or a new environment, that shifts things around boundaries. Your boundaries and your need for boundaries and the type of boundaries is going to change over time. And so I want to invite you to let them evolve and change. And here are some of the factors that might contribute to changing boundaries. And again, all related to your unique situation, but I just want to give you some things to look at and notice so that it makes sense to you when it's time to change boundaries. I also wanted to include a nod to many people are now boss of a company, or they might be self-employed and the whole of a company. And with those considerations, there might be some additional things to consider around boundaries. How do you communicate to maintain and support and preserve the health and well-being of your business or of your employees or of your community? And so I wanted to just give some thoughts and some questions that might help you think about how you can do this and do this well. And as we wrap up, before we get to the questions, I just wanted to remind you again that creating, implementing, and maintaining boundaries may involve a whole lot of things that you're not used to. So I really want to keep setting the tone, normalizing what you might experience and what's really a part of boundaries, having difficult conversations, feeling uncomfortable as you set the boundaries, and then wait. This might really invite you to get clear on your personal values and priorities, and not only get clear, but also take action in a different way. Really helps you to assess what are your personal needs and your capacity. Really honoring your personal limits, setting reasonable expectations. You might learn some new things about yourself and about the people in your life and about the people that you work with or about your work through this exploration of boundaries. It might invite you to pause and slow down, right? That's a tough one for me, that pause button. Might just be about saying no, shifting relationships. Boundaries might be around asking others for help, and it also might be getting feedback from people outside of the situation. You don't have to do this alone, and I do invite you to pull in people that you trust or look around you and say, who in my life seems to be really great at boundaries that I could learn from or I could talk to get some information and some support. And use your support system as you're implementing boundaries for that just extra hand to hold, right? Boundaries can offer so much goodness in your life that when you get comfortable, when you get practice with them, it's going to start to become easier over time, and it's not going to feel like, oh, so big and so hard all the time. So it does get easier. You will feel more comfortable as you practice and feel more confident and confident with this skill, also known as boundaries. So I've given you a lot to think about today. I've taken you through steps to think about and gather information. And I've really helped you to see boundaries from a holistic perspective. How can you create a better work environment, a better life environment to do the things that matter to you? I hope I've given you a lot to think about, to chew on, to talk about, to practice. That's really going to create a meaningful difference in your work life and your life, right? And the two aren't necessarily separate, but for the purposes of this conversation, we needed to create a little bit of containment about what we're discussing. That also helps you to feel empowered to address things in a way that feels manageable, okay? If you have questions, you can put them in the chat. And if you want to follow up with me, I welcome any feedback. I welcome questions. I'm always learning every time I do this presentation about what landed, about what made sense, and about what didn't make sense. So you're welcome to follow up with me. And with that, I am going to say thank you again for enjoying this whole rich conversation on boundaries. And I'm going to turn it over to Nicole so we can wrap up with our questions.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Allie, for sharing both your time and your knowledge with us. It really is such useful information regardless of your current employment circumstance, especially now in the process of adjusting to new norms in life and environmental shifts. I know that I was definitely taking a lot of notes throughout this. So really quickly, before we head into the Q&A, I do want to highlight some of our upcoming events for all of you. We still have 3 sessions left in our Balancing Work and Cancer series, including some new sessions on being newly diagnosed and communicating effectively, which could also tie into this idea of setting boundaries. And we also have one on health insurance in November, right in time for open enrollment. We also have more virtual programming that you can hopefully check out. Those are listed at the bottom here. And whenever you're looking for any upcoming events, please be sure to check out our upcoming events page for more information. And I do want to really quickly point out that we do have our West Coast Conference on Work and Cancer coming up. That will be on Saturday, October 17th, and registration is now open. So now it is time to open up the call for questions. Our operator, Jess, will explain now how Q&A works.
Thank you, Nicole. The floor is now open for your questions. You can type your question in the box at the lower left-hand side of your screen, or if you've dialed in the phone line, you can press *1 on your telephone keypad at this time. Again, that is *1 on your telephone keypad to ask a question via the phone, or simply type your question in the Q&A box.
Okay, so we do have a question from Faye. Faye asks, could you comment on boundaries in this era of COVID-19 home offices?
Yeah, so great question, Faye. And what I'll direct you back to is that slide that I mentioned about working from home. And so I hope that some of these pointers will answer your question, right? If you can set up the dedicated workspace, even creating signage about communicates to others in your home when you are available, when you are unavailable. I've seen some really creative things that people have, like a stoplight, and like red is like absolutely do not disturb. Yellow is like maybe you can disturb, and green is like open and available, right? So sometimes that can be really helpful. Creating some new routines and transitions in and out of the day can be helpful. Many people have lost many of their touchstones of the routine that they're used to at the work, and so it is an opportunity when you're working from home to create those in some different ways to help create some structure and framework or containment to the day, so it just doesn't bleed over to 24 hours a day you're feeling connected and called to work.
Yes, absolutely. I may need to look into one of those stoplights for my own office.
Yeah, it's really helpful.
We have another question from Amy. She asks, what if a manager or supervisor looks at boundaries as not being a team player?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I can see how some people might think about that, which is if you're focused on you and what you can do and can't do, how is that working with the team? And I guess where I'd frame it is if you are taking care of yourself and working within your zone of genius in all the ways that that means, and you're going to be able to contribute differently and better to the team. And boundaries isn't saying I'm not doing anything and I'm not doing anything I don't want to do, which sometimes we have to do stuff we don't love in our jobs. But boundaries actually really does help teamwork and does help teams to work more effectively. So I'd invite you to think about how to frame it so it shows I'm doing this so that I can contribute to this, right? So there might be a way to use some expanded language to really highlight how you are showing up for the team by doing certain things or by setting some individual or personal boundaries.
That's absolutely great advice.
And I'll also just say for that, there's kind of that quote of like, if one person isn't doing well, then technically the team isn't doing well. And so teamwork really also involves looking at the health and well-being of each individual contributor of that team, which again, not all managers and humans do, but it's another way to look at it and to just remind yourself that that is really true.
Absolutely. It looks like we have time for one more question. I see one from Brett. They said, I expect to return from long-term disability soon. What sort of thank you, I'm glad to be back letter, if any, is expected by local management and corporate HQ HR?
I guess that really depends. Depends on have they said anything that's expected, and if not, then I think it really becomes a total personal choice. What, if anything, would feel good to introduce yourself back or to alert your colleagues that you are back and ready to work? And is that a time that you communicate any of your schedule going forward? That's a point to really set the tone. I'm back. I'm excited to work. If there's any acknowledgement of maybe what they've done to cover while you've been out or anything around that of how the colleagues have supported you, that might be a time to address that as well, or maybe that's done on an individual basis. So I think that can be a great opportunity to personally set the tone, which is also really what your colleagues are going to look to and potentially follow as far as you returning to work.
Yeah, I would just also echo on that, the return to work might be an adjustment period where you're still learning what your boundaries are going to be as well. So, kind of giving a general appreciation, thank you for covering while I was out, probably would suffice. And then as you get back into the swing of things and recognize areas where you might need to be setting boundaries, that might be a good time to kind of implement some of that communication as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, so in the interest of time and respecting everybody's day, I do want to just wrap up here since it is a little bit after the hour. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. We will be circulating the online evaluation form that we do hope that you'll fill out when you have the opportunity. Your feedback, again, is not only very helpful in shaping future calls, but also in continuing for the funding that we receive to have these kinds of programs. If you do have a question that comes up, I know that Allie shared her information. You can also reach out to us at cancerandcareers@cew.org, and we'll be sure to get the answers for you. And once again, just wanted to leave up the requirements for obtaining CEUs here on this slide. Thank you so much, Allie, for taking the time today to share your insights and your knowledge. I know that this is a really important topic, especially right now. And I want to thank you all for attending with us today. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.